5 women 7 feet tall, faces that do not belong to their bodies, a room that does not hold together. Fruit on a table that falls off the edge of perspective and never gets up. When he shows it to his friends, they laugh. Matisse calls it a hoax. Braque says it makes him feel like drinking turpentine. They do not say this is genius. They say this man has lost his mind. They are both right. For 400 years before this painting, Western art had one agreement with the viewer. It would show you the world as your eye expects to see it. One vanishing point. Coherent space. A window that pretends to be reality. You stand in front of the canvas and the illusion holds. The room makes sense. The body makes sense. You are safe. Les Demoiselles d'Avignon tears the agreement up. The curtain on the left is flat. No depth, no shadow, no pretense of space behind it. The table in the foreground tips forward as if gravity works differently there. The 5 women occupy the same canvas but not the same reality. Their bodies are angular, fractured, assembled from views that cannot coexist, front and side and above simultaneously. The room does not fit them. The walls do not touch. This is not a mistake. This is the announcement. Perspective is dead. The window that pretended to show you the real world was always a lie. He will not tell it anymore. But here is the question he never answered. When you break the rules of looking, who decides which new rules replace them? He did, alone in his studio, with the absolute certainty that his eyes were the only ones that mattered. That is not revolution. That is just a man with a brush. Look at the woman on the far left, her arm raised behind her head, opening a curtain, but her body is made of angles that do not bend. She looks like a door that became a woman by accident. The 2 in the center, eyes too large. Noses that are not noses, just lines he drew and decided not to erase. They look at you directly, not seducing, not inviting, judging, and then the woman on the far right. The one everyone sees last, because everyone wants to see her last. Her face is not a face, it is a mask, angular, fractured, assembled from a tradition that has nothing to do with the brothel on Avignon Street in Barcelona where this scene is supposedly set. He went to the Trocadero Museum in Paris in 1907, a palace of stolen things, masks, figures, objects taken from altars in places he would never visit. He described it himself years later with honesty that surprises. He said the smell of mold and neglect grabbed him by the throat. He said he wanted to leave but couldn't. He said the masks weren't like any other pieces of sculpture. They were magic things. Intercessors. That's what they were against everything, against unknown, threatening spirits. He understood something real in that museum, that art is not decoration, art is a weapon against terror, art is the thing a people makes to stand between themselves and a hostile universe. What he did not say, what he was never asked to say, is that the magic was not his to take. The weapon was aimed at someone else's gods. He took it anyway. Painted those masks onto the bodies of white women in a Barcelona brothel. Never asked the mask, never asked the women. Took from both and called the result the first painting of the 20th century. He was not wrong about the century, he was just incomplete about the cost. Here's what the viral channels will not tell you, or rather, here's what they cannot tell you because their genre does not have room for it. Les Demoiselles d'Avignon is not just a painting about prostitution, it is a painting about who gets to look. The women are not ashamed. That is the first crime. In European painting, women in brothels are supposed to look away, or look down, or look sad. These women look at you with faces that have no apology in them. They were waiting here before you arrived. They will be here after you leave. But the second crime is deeper. The mask on the far right, the one that is not European, the one taken from a tradition of sacred protection and resistance. Picasso put that mask on a woman's body because he needed something terrible to break the back of Western beauty. He needed power he did not earn. He needed a god that was not his, and then he sold it to a Russian collector named Shukin, who hid it in his staircase because he could not bear to look at it every day. The collector never asked where the mask came from. Neither did Picasso. Neither probably will you. That is the off-canvas crime, not what is painted. What is permitted to stay unpainted The hands that carved the mask, the altar it was taken from, the people whose spiritual technology became the raw material for someone else's revolution. Picasso later denied the African influence entirely. African art, never heard of it, but his own words at the Trocadero betray him. He stayed in that room long after he wanted to leave. He understood what those masks were doing. He took what he understood and used it, and then denied he had. That is not just appropriation, that is the structure of colonialism itself. Take the power, erase the source, call the result progress. Here is the question that turns this painting from masterpiece into mirror. Why are these 5 women the beginning of modern art? Every woman in European painting before 1907 was there to be looked at, to be desired, saved, mourned, to be a symbol of something a man felt and needed to see outside himself. These 5 do none of that. They do not need you. They are not even sure you exist. That indifference is what terrified Picasso's friends. They are painted as free by a man who controlled every inch of their bodies. That is not liberation. That is a more sophisticated cage. And the mask on the far right is not liberated either. It was taken from a context where it meant something irreplaceable. Protection, communication with the dead, the boundary between the living and whatever stands behind the living, and placed here in this painting to mean something else entirely, to mean threat, to mean the erotic made savage, to mean whatever a European audience needed it to mean so they could feel disrupted without being responsible for the disruption. The mask did not agree to this. No one asked. Today it hangs in the Museum of Modern Art in New York. Millions of people stand in front of it every year. They take photos, they nod, they move on. No one says these masks were taken from altars. No one says these women were paid to stand still. No one says he denied the influence of the people whose power made this painting possible. That is not because the viewers are stupid. It is because the painting has won. It has convinced you that art is only what is on the canvas. The rest, the hands that carved the mask, the bodies that stood in the brothel, the museum that displayed the stolen object alongside the painting and called it context. The painting has taught you not to see them. That is not genius. That is architecture. The careful, deliberate construction of what gets to be visible and what gets to remain off canvas. Picasso built that architecture. The 20th century moved into it and called it home. You want to know if this is a masterpiece? Here is the test. The next time you see a mask in a museum, any mask anywhere, do not look at the glass case. Look at the space behind it. The empty space where an altar used to be. The empty space where a god used to live. The empty space where a person's face used to mean something other than art. That empty space is not in the museum. That empty space is off canvas, and this painting put it there. It just did not tell you it was there. Now you know, so now you are responsible. The masterpiece is not the one that shows you something new. It is the one that hides something old and dares you to ask why it had to disappear.